a national poll that has Cruz ahead of Trump, which is interesting. Here's, Kelly Jackson, the doomsday scenario that Paul Harris mentioned filling in for Martin Kilcoyne yesterday. By the way, Martin Kilcoyne will be joining us here in 15 minutes live from Jupiter, Florida, as he welcomes in the Cardinals as the pitchers and catchers report. So, follow this chessboard, if you will. Okay. President Obama nominates a Supreme Court justice. It's not confirmed by the Senate. Mm-hmm. The new term starts October 1st. So they will start the next term with a 4-4 or an 8-person court, right? Mm-hmm. They have 8 people now.
Right.
So any major decision might end in 4-4. Mm-hmm. Let's say Ted Cruz wins the nomination.
Okay.
Right? Let's say Ted Cruz goes on and wins, which is a real possibility because he's now leading in the polls nationally. Mm-hmm. Is this going to happen? I don't know, but it's plausible. Ted Cruz wins the nomination. Ted Cruz wins the general election. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump sues and says he was born in Canada. He's not an American. He should not be, he's disqualified from being president of the United States. Because this is a pressing issue, it works its way up the courts, ultimately being decided by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rules 4-4.
So what you're saying is the presidential election could be held up.
No, I'm saying
saying?
Here's my doomsday scenario.
Okay.
Ted Cruz wins the national election. Uh-huh. Donald Trump sues. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court is divided on whether or not Ted Cruz is eligible to be president.
Right.
So the Supreme Court comes to a 4-4 tie. Mm-hmm. So how do you have what happens next if the Supreme Court rules 4-4? In which the question on the table is the man who won the general election, is he eligible to be president?
Right.
And they come back with a 4-4 tie.
Well, first of all,
what happens then?
Well, the process of it going to the Supreme Court, it wouldn't be that fast of a process.
It would be. It would be because this is a pressing question. It would very quickly work its way up to the courts. Right? It would have to. I mean, that's, Bush v. Gore. They didn't take 6 years to rule on.
Right.
It's that they got to expedite it.
That is crazy.
That is a doomsday scenario.
I'm sure that's already something Trump is thinking about. Don't you think so?
Look, Cruz winning,
especially now that Cruz is kind of
Cruz winning the nomination, still a long shot. Cruz winning the general election, but very, 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 very plausible. Winning the general election, long shot, still very plausible. Mm-hmm. Trump is threatening to sue all over the place. And our own legal analyst, Greg Willard, St. Louis University law professor, says even though he says it's unsettled, it's an unsettled court question. Now, I don't think anybody thinks that Ted Cruz, anyone sane in where gravity works the way the rest of us does, I don't think anybody would argue that Ted Cruz isn't eligible to be president because he was born in Canada by a Cuban father and an American mother, but no court has ruled on that.
Right.
And the Constitution says it's a natural-born citizen. Well, what does a natural-born citizen actually mean? Mm-hmm. And so Greg Willard went through this with us, and he said, it's not settled law.
No, it is not.
Right.
It's not.
There are great constitutional lawyers who say it's not settled, even though we think we know. But
kind of some gray areas.
So it's a real possibility that the Supreme Court could vote 4-4. Now, Paul Harris brought this up yesterday on a show, which is where I got the idea, and I almost drove off the road because I was like, "Whoa, what happens then?"
That's crazy. I mean, it would all have to be a perfect storm.
Well, the expert Paul Harris had on gave this answer. She said, "This was a woman who clerked for one of the Supreme Court justices. She said, if that scenario were to happen, she would hope that the justices would go into a room and figure out a 5-3 decision." Mm-hmm. one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, surely they've been deadlocked before.
Well,
Well, no, they haven't been in the situation where
right.
they've only been an 8-person.
Right.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real possibility, and also having it thrown into the House of Representatives is a real possibility if Donald Trump runs as a third party. We also have a possibility of some type of open convention, which I was reading the rules on that open convention. Holy mackerel! Wait till you hear some of those rules. So we are headed in for some interesting times. 7:10, Big 550 KTRS. None more interesting than the upcoming baseball season, which gets underway. Yesterday, pitchers and catchers and Martin Kilcoyne all report.